Good to go.
Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for attending, for our attendees coming here today, and for all of our panelists here today, and for all of the wonderful work you do that kind of initiated the reason why we invited you here today to talk about community engagement on a local and global level, and a global to local level. And so I'm going to do I had some larger bios, but I really wanted to start off by sharing who's on our panel today, but also asking each of you to share how you feel like you situate yourselves locally and globally in the work that you do and the way that you approach that work. So people don't have to hear from me the kind of large narrations I read on your pages on your organizations or on Drexel's website, but you can really speak for yourselves around how you situate yourself in this work, again, both locally and globally. And so I'm going to start with Dr. Steve Dolph, who is who just had a big title change. So I'm going to remember it. Is an assistant or teaching professor of the Spanish department of Spanish in the Department of Global Studies and Modern Languages, as well as the associate dean for diversity, equity, and inclusion in the College of Arts and Sciences. He's also a teaching faculty fellow in the Lindy Center of Civic Engagement, where he leads workshops and faculty support in community-based global learning. Steve, do you mind sharing your response to the first question?
Thanks so much, Carrie, and thank you for inviting me to this panel. Locally, I am a faculty here at Drexel University. I am a neighbor in Northwest Philadelphia, in the neighborhood of Mount Airy. I am a parent of 2 children who are enrolled in the School District of Philadelphia. And I am a board member of North Square Neighborhood Project, a proud board member for a year, where I help to liaise between the local organizations' work in their community and around cultural preservation and land stewardship, and the community engaged work that we are doing at Drexel University. Globally, I am a child of the diaspora. I am a first generation Colombian American, born and raised in Queens, New York, Jackson Heights. And I engage with communities in the Caribbean diaspora around issues around migration and climate change. I also have connections with folks who are doing advocacy and education in the Central American and Mexican diaspora, folks who are through migrants and new arrivals, new Americans in Philadelphia as well. Yeah, that's me. Thanks, Carrie.
Thanks, Steve. Next, I'm going to introduce Teresa Elliott, who's the Executive Director of North Square Neighborhood Project in North Philly. And Teresa, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself, anything you want to share about North Square and how you situate yourself locally and globally.
Thank you. First of all, it's a real pleasure to be here. And my name is Teresa Elliott. I've been executive director for 4 years now at North Square Neighborhood Project in West Kensington. This organization started as an after-school program for kids from the community. And we still have high schoolers who come every day after school and in the summer. And at the same time, we have community gardens, where you're all welcome to come. And that's where a lot of our cultural preservation happens, and trying to get our high schoolers out to learn about urban agriculture. I would say that locally right now, my life is just about here at work. I spend endless hours here. I love it. It's the kind of job that just grabs you. And I am learning gardening. I get to spend time with high schoolers every day, which is such an experience. They teach me so much, and wow, I'm humbled by the lives that they have, the obstacles that they face, and they still make it here and have fun while they're here. Spending a lot of time also, as I said, in the gardens. Globally, I'm half Cuban, and the Cuban side of me we have very strong cultural identity. Well, I've spent some time in Cuba, but mainly just the Latino culture, the sense of humor, and I feel very much at home here in Puerto Rico. And with the Puerto Rican population here, and of course Miami, where a lot of Cubans live. And my daughters are all moved to California. So I feel like I'm spread out a little bit, spending time there. And my father was in the US military. And we only spent fourth grade in the States. I mainly spent my time in North Africa. And here I am in West Philly and enjoying life right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Next, I'm going to introduce Parfait. Parfait Kouacou is an assistant teaching professor of French in the Department of Global Studies and Modern Languages at Drexel University. And so, Parfait, if you wouldn't mind just sharing how you situate yourself, both locally and globally.
Thank you, Carrie. It's nice hearing about everyone and situating themselves. So first, I am a dragon. Concept dragon, always a dragon. So I situate myself within the university community as a faculty, and I see myself as a participant to the various processes that are taking place right now at the institutional level. And so, you know, I mean, globally, I would say that I am a global citizen. I am a naturalized American, but I was born in Cote d'Ivoire in West Africa. And I had the opportunity to travel several continents and work. So I can see that any problem that I am seeing here, when I think about it, I don't think about it simply locally. I am also thinking about it the way it's happening in Africa or in Jordan, the Middle East, and in France and Europe, things like that. So this gives me a way and a perspective in terms of the way I approach problems. And yeah, this is me. Coming back to locally, I live here in West Philadelphia, which makes me part of the West Philadelphia community. Not only that, but also part of the Black community in West Philadelphia, which is also divided into two between the immigrant community and the African American community. This is me.
Thank you, Parfait. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Eric Eady, who's the President and Chief Operating Officer of the Coalition of African and Caribbean Communities, or AFRICOM. Dr. Eady, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself and sharing how you situate yourself both locally and globally.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. The first portion of my local and global situation has already been uttered. I am the Chief Operating Officer for the Coalition of African Communities. I live in East Oakland, where I have always been after living temporarily on Temple University campus, where I, did my PhD years ago when I first came to the United States. In terms of my connection with Drexel University's university, a few things I want to mention. The autism project is one of the things that linked Drexel University to AFRICOM when I became the chair, and of course, the class that I am sometimes facilitating with Dr. Parfait, immersing Drexel students into the African immigrant community by way of learning French. I have worked as a faculty here in Philadelphia as well, from Temple University outside of Philadelphia to Illinois, Knox College, back to Philadelphia, Acadia University, Jefferson University. And currently, I am leading AFRICOM, but also doing some work with the Solidarity Center in Washington, D.C., which is my way of saying that, I have kind of sort of retired a little bit from teaching from now. I play soccer a lot. The National Service Center is one of the organizations that I have worked with, Bathrum's Garden. And then globally, I am an immigrant from Cote d'Ivoire, a former Fulbright, student. That's how I landed in this wonderful country. And I have been interested in globalization, which is actually the title of my dissertation, political, development in West African countries. and also issues of development, and currently focusing more on workers' rights.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. And then last but not least, I'd love to introduce Ahaji Schreffler, who's the Senior Director for Education Abroad in the Office of Global Engagement at Drexel. Ahaji, if you don't mind just sharing how you situate yourself locally and globally.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. It's so great to be among such wonderful colleagues and friends. I get to say bon après-midi, buenas tardes. So let's see, locally, like Parfait, I'm a dragon. I have worked at Drexel for almost 20 years, exclusively in education abroad. And so this is my community. Within that community, global is front and center for me, of course, and that means supporting students and faculty. And I also wear a couple of other hats that in service to community, one being the president for the Black Colleague Resource Group, BEAD, and the other being the founder and facilitator of the Drexel Meditation Group that's open to the campus and surrounding community at large, that's intended to bring people together to practice self-care and mindfulness together. So those are my primary how I would situate myself. I'm also a Philadelphian living in the city now after many years of living in New Jersey. I'm a community gardener, and I'm a Drexel alumni. I don't know if I mentioned that. And then globally, which I feel like there's a lot of intersection between local and global for me because of my work, but I'm the founder and president of a small grassroots nonprofit organization that's based in Haiti. I'm also an instructor for intensive courses abroad. I've taken many students and volunteers to Haiti, as well as Ecuador, getting ready for Tanzania, have supported Steve, taking students to Puerto Rico. And so I get to be in a lot of global communities and support faculty as well in doing that work. So that's me for now. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. And so I want to also acknowledge that I think a lot of folks on this panel have engaged with one another, with somebody else on the panel in some way, doing this work. And I think that's something to me that's always fundamental to community engagement, is that we do work together, and that's like where we start. And situating myself, I try and support here on campus, along with the Office of Global Engagement, trying to support this type of work and ways for people to be able to do it together. So resourcing all of the amazing work. And one of the questions I think we get asked a lot when folks are beginning to do this work. And so I'm going to ask a few questions, and I wanted to just, if not everybody has to answer all of the questions, because I know a lot of you do this work together, but feel free, please, to jump in. And the first question really is about, when considering these connections between local and global communities, histories, and challenges, when we're drawing those connections, we're either bringing students into global settings to discuss issues, or kind of bringing global issues into local contexts to explore issues together. What do you all feel is something that's important or even crucial, but also very necessary about this work, but maybe something that people often miss, or that can be missed when trying to do community engagement in that context?
All right, maybe I can go. Well, I think there are many things that people can miss, but I want to think about maybe the content of what is global engagement, and especially global engagement courses. I think in my area, for instance, I am focusing on community building and understanding diverse perspective, and I think one of the aspects that is very important in an institution such as Drexel, which is working hard. I see that in the strategic planning that we are aiming to create, or at least to form or train students that are culturally competent. And therefore, I believe that when you do the work in this area, you want to really be innovative and create something that actually would not be, the traditional scholarship. And therefore, it could be something that people miss. So one aspect in this that I wanted to emphasize is that if a student are learning to understand other community, it would be really important that those students get to engage in a way that is not what scholarship used to be or is, traditionally. And there should be content, and this type of content are usually beyond and sometimes more than what it's sometimes something that does not exist or does not exist already. And those kind of things are important to really emphasize when talking about this.
I believe that, based on my long experience with immigrant communities in Philadelphia, and also being in academia, at some point I have decided to view myself, make myself, and grow myself as position myself at the junction of the academic world, research, and community organizing, community development. And I believe that, it became a very, very rewarding, in the sense that, I always, by the time I was teaching, tell my students that what I teach is the result of the experience that, what we have, let's say in the streets or in the communities, and what we have in the communities, will lead us also to inform the ways we teach in such a way that, what students are exposed to real problems, and also to real, problem solving issue. That's number one. And in the midst of all of that, I believe that, one of the things that we did not pay attention to a lot, and I did not, was sharing my experience, is probably the question of identities. Last week, I participated in a small session with about, 16 high school students from the Caribbean and from Africa, mostly from Sierra Leone, and hearing the kids, were sharing their perspective, on how they work with their parents and some of the things that, we want to understand. As a parent, myself, and as an African, right, first generation even here, that gave me an opportunity to understand that, what this notion of identity again can be bloated, can be overblown, can shift a lot, in the world that, what we live today, between parents who are raised this way and want to do something, and then how all of those, will intersect. Another thing that we find out is the centrality of our families. Of course, identity shifting will be culture also shifting. But one big thing that, we have ignored for a long time, and now we are getting more and more around, is the trauma of immigration. We have addressed people. We have tried to resolve issues in our communities without necessarily put our fingers on the impact, right, that this transition to a new world can represent, and the linkages that, we can also make between immigrants or migrants and workers, right? There is a lot of things that are playing in there that very often we have ignored, and which I believe, for me, are very important.
I can jump in if that's it. Haji, did you want to go? Go ahead.
I'll make it brief because I want to hear what you have to say too.
Go.
So this is, I guess, speaking specifically to the experience that I had taking students abroad to, various communities where the narrative is that these communities are in need. And I think the thing that's often missed, and this gets at the heart of community-based development, which is a key theme of these programs, is that lack of resources does not equate a lack of assets. And how many assets any given community has: knowledge, assets, innovation, just a wealth of resources. Maybe not material resources, because those are often the obvious things that may be lacking. But there's so much else. So for example, when I've taken students to Haiti, I mean, the material lack is very apparent, but what often is so striking for students is the tremendous amount of assets that these communities have. And so really there's nothing missing per se. And I think that is usually a big wake-up call for the students that I've seen, to come to realize that it's, especially coming from an academic context where we're, the holders of knowledge, or coming from a framework that's about producing knowledge, that actually the knowledge that these communities have is profound. And the material resources may be something that we can assist with, but certainly, there's a lot more to learn and to gain and exchange oftentimes. So
I wanted to thank you, Haji. I wanted to continue some of the thoughts that Dr. Edie was sharing about the ways in which migrant life and migrant work shapes our city and the greater Philadelphia area. I think many folks know that Kennett Square, Pennsylvania is the mushroom capital of the world, probably. It's a place where, as a high intense agriculture network around mushroom farming in particular, but many other neighborhoods, communities, not just around greater Philadelphia, but in central New Jersey as well, where there's intensive monoculture farming that feeds these urban centers. Many of those places are populated by migrants, many of them not placed within formal immigration systems. And so I think even if we don't have to leave our neighborhood, we don't have to leave our community grocery stores and markets to interact with global communities and global forces that are shaping people's lives in profound ways. We can think about local food systems through a global lens. I think we can separate the local and the global, and that can sometimes be really important. But I think something that's critical to the way I approach it is to think about these as like a lens that you can either put over your eyes or remove from your eyes. And we can look at most anything around us as a global manifestation, like housing insecurity, gun violence, mass incarceration, housing gentrification. We can look at those things as their local manifestation. That's important, but we can always take the opportunity to bring a global lens to these things, and that's like where these kinds of conversations with folks who look at these things outside of the local context can be really fruitful. And so I really do appreciate Dr. Edie for bringing that forward. I think from an educator standpoint, one of the things that brings the work that we're doing in global engagement and in local civic engagement through the Lindy Center together is this question of defamiliarization. One of the big assets, to go back to a great concept that Haji brought forward, that we have in this kind of work, experiential learning work, is that students don't just learn about the concepts or the ideas, or do readings or listen to podcasts or watch documentaries about these things. Although that is, of course, important, that prior knowledge is really important when we're engaging in close proximity to folks who experience these issues. But when you're doing experiential learning work, either locally or globally, what we're really thinking about is the way that the students are themselves personally, emotionally impacted through defamiliarization. They feel like they can see things differently. Things appear differently when someone who is very close to it explains what it means to them, right? And how they interact with these issues every day in a non-academic way, in a way that's very personal and familiar to them. So our students really leave these experiences changed. Whether this is happening at a local community agriculture site, at a county jail, at a community center, or really anywhere. Our goal is for students to feel that sense of defamiliarization with their experience, both locally and globally. Thanks.
But I said, did you want to add anything? We can.
Oh, so I'm just fascinated hearing this, and I'm love
It's riveting.
love. Yes, it is, and I appreciate what you've been saying, and Haji, about the lack of resources is not lack of assets. Our community here feels that very much, and it's all about the connection. And I love that Drexel students come to this neighborhood and get to know and see all the assets of this community. We have sort of running jokes sometimes about what people have said before coming. Like one time the group came and said, they were coming by bus, like a school bus. And they said, could you guarantee our safety? And we're like, are you kidding? And then we were like, well, no. And then staff got so offended. It was like, what? What do you mean guarantee, safety? And why are you saying it's a dangerous neighborhood? Well, of course it is, but this is where we work, right? And come every day. And it makes me think of one time I was working in Dominican Republic, and the group we were working with was telling us about a group from the United States that had come to build a school or something. And they were laughing. You're going, can you imagine? The one thing they're bringing us is labor, so all these comments, they just add up, and it's learning on top of learning and top of learning. And so hopefully one day we'll get it right. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, I was struck by, Steve knows I'm going to reflect on what everyone says for a second before we move on. But I think one thing I was really struck by was the ways that in what Parfait shared about kind of almost like a letting go or of things that we maybe thought we knew, and what Teresa just said about like letting go of assumptions, and what Dr. Edie said about like letting go of, and Haji about letting go of maybe ways that we think of engagement, right? Of like that it's bringing things, or it's doing for, or it's thinking of concepts in particular ways. But it's also, I think, to what Steve was saying, is sometimes it's revealing connections that are already there. It's revealing our location within things that are going on around us already, those local and global contexts. And I think something I heard at the beginning that kind of we came back to at the end was, a lot of times when we're doing this work in community, it's creating things that weren't there before. In some ways, where we don't often have blueprints for what we can create together, what things we can kind of generate together, new stories or new ways of working together, new scholarship, new approaches. When we're doing things with new groups, with new partnerships or new communities. So I think, I feel like there's little pieces of all of that in the work that you all do, which is really beautiful. And so I'm going to skip actually to one of our last questions that I gave our panelists, but I think in what you all shared, sometimes I think one of the assumptions and misunderstandings of community engagement we hear is that it's about somebody going into a place over there and working with those people and then coming back and talking about it and connecting it to their learning, or kind of going and bringing, like Haji said, bringing resources or bringing assets, or bringing things to another place. When really, I think the way that what I heard from all of you, and the way I know all of you do this work, is really thinking about engaging in community, building relationships, doing things together, and building our ability to do it together. And the question is, why do that? Why engage in local and global issues in community with others? Why build relationships as part of this work? What do we have to gain, or maybe what do we have to lose if we don't?
Well, I can go. One way I see that is that our students are leaders of tomorrow, and it's something important that we want to actually recognize and make it meaningful. And so, when students learn about diversity in the way that they learn in the class that I give, it gives them more, knowledge to be able to think better, to think the world better tomorrow. I believe that this way of doing it is one of the ways that makes I mean, personally, as the instructor of the course, it gives students more knowledge, but it gives me also some knowledge. And I believe that, as you said, they said, why do you share this way? Engage in community. We engage in community because we engage in community in this way, we learn not only from what we do, but also from the engagement that we have with community. And that's something I really like about, engaging in community in this sense. I want to stop there, but that's the first point I want to raise to get the conversation started.
If I may, I would say for me, it's the only key to success in anything that we do. In my small example, I started 4 years ago. We have these gardens, very few resources and staff. And boy, wouldn't it be wonderful if the neighbors all helped? And it has taken 4 years. A lot of patience, of an interest in wanting to connect with members of the community, frequent visits and one-on-one talking to people and getting to know and caring. And now we're at a point where we have a group of community members who've sort of taken over the gardens. They're full of ideas, they're making decisions, and they're expanding, and it's just a beautiful sight, but it wouldn't have happened any other way. Thank you.
In the work that we do with communities, it is about, quite often we talk about, how people are resilient. If we are dealing with immigrant communities, for instance, with all of the trauma that I talk about, all of the obstacles, the barriers that, what people face, it can be linguistic.
I think we lost Dr. Edie.
Right? It can be either by plane or by traversing the entire Southern America to reach, the US southern border. When you put all that together, the issue is about, social movements, right? The issue is about, social justice. The issue is about, addressing some of the systemic factors. It can be locally, it can be also globally, that lead people actually to migrate. A few years ago, there was a group of artists from all over the world, Mexico, France, that came in here and worked with the Philadelphia School of Fine Art to put together, I think it was around 2016, to put together a show around, refugees and immigrants. And when they interviewed me, I told them that, immigration for me comes to only one word with 4 letters. It is HOPE. Immigration is hope. There is a reason why people move. Whether it is for political reason, they're looking for a safe haven. And even when we go back to the history of the United States, for somebody like Parfait who naturalized, one of the questions is, why is that the migrants left, London or left, England to come in here in search of freedom, in search of, a better life and hope. So when you put all that together, there is no way to instill that hope, to reach and achieve a perfect goal without a grassroots movement. If not, it becomes, something like, you are patronizing. It becomes something that, you are imposing from top down some sort of solutions to people, whereas the people who themselves are, let's say, experiencing whatever situation is, have the resources, not only mentally, they have the ingenuity. And I'm going to end this statement by looking at one example. In 2018, we restarted the campaign at Africom's level with the natural hair braiders in Philadelphia. Those natural African hair women, were braiders. Most of them, of course, were women, have shops established. Maybe even today, this morning, somebody called me. The state of Pennsylvania is still after them for this cosmetology license, and then they're giving them citations and all that. When we mounted this movement for these women, we were successful in empowering the ladies themselves, whether they speak English clearly or not, to come to a hearing with PA senators and PA legislators, right? And to give their own testimony and talk about, the issues that they are facing And why is that, what their job should not be? It was such a very powerful movement. And today, as we speak, this case is still, in the state house of Pennsylvania trying to amend that, whereas we are also pursuing litigation. It is because we were able to put the women themselves, as at the center at the grassroots level. And I think that's the reason why we need to have those connections so that, we do not lead a movement that will be decentered, actually, right, from the real needs of the people. And that is key wherever we go. There is no way to resolve poverty without engaging the people who are themselves. There is no way to resolve violence in Philadelphia without engaging the Philadelphia population, whether it's in South or Southwest Philadelphia, that are actually bearing the brunt, right, of this gun violence that has engulfed, with the city of Philadelphia.
I'm going to take a big risk and give like an academic answer first. If again, I was inspired by one of the things that Dr. Edie said about knowledge transfer and knowledge preservation. I think one of the Achilles heels of higher education is that we tend to sometimes have a kind of a rigid understanding about what knowledge production is and how knowledge is conserved and passed on. And to connect with what Parfait was saying too about thinking about how we transfer knowledge to young people so that they can transfer that knowledge on to future generations in a way that's ethical and sustainable. I think that example of like the work that these women are doing to conserve and pass on and make a living from this knowledge about, self-care, cosmetology, beauty, and their traditions is really important within the work that we do as well, food work. A lot of the foodways that the organizations that we work with have brought to this country have been under extreme duress. And those foodways have been conserved through the work of women primarily, that's non-remunerated, but that is critical. It doesn't have a lot of social capital in the traditional sense of the kind of knowledge that we produce, that tend to produce here in higher education. So from a simply like academic lens, it's really important for us to consider a diverse way of thinking about what knowledge production is for and how we value knowledge in our society. And then the other thing I wanted to say about this is why relationships are important. So that those kinds of knowledge, like that's community-driven, grassroots knowledge, tends to circulate through relationships, through close proximity, right? Those things aren't being published in journals or magazines or newspapers or books. That knowledge is circulated, that critical cultural knowledge is circulated from one person to the next, from one generation to the next. And it's essential that we learn to value that kind of knowledge, and not just the translation of that knowledge into a book or into an article or something like that, but the relationships and the spaces that conserve and cultivate those forms of knowledge. And I wanted to quote something that Carrie has shared with us too, and in conversations about why relationships, why are these courses that we teach, these community-based courses, so focused on relationships? Why are relationships the center of these courses? And it's not just about like therapy, although it is also that. One thing that Carrie has shared with me that's really stuck is that relationships are the unit of social change. If you look back at the civil rights movement, if you look at civil rights movement, not just in the United States, but globally, building relationships across difference is how social change happens. And so if we are only valuing metrics in the traditional sense, we are not going to achieve the kind of social change that is the mandate of all civic projects in this country, but specifically also in this university as well. That's it.
I can very quickly build on that, maybe in 1 minute. I love that, and then it takes me back to one of the movies that I love to show my students, at the time when I was teaching, is the movie about what happened in Seattle in 1999 at the summit of the WTO. One of the actors, forget his name now, just said, hey, listen, welcome to the first internet, right, social movement or protest of the world. It means that, whether people have used, a cell phone, because, this is the generation that we have today, and this is the world we live in today. At the end of the day, we will not be able to achieve the kind of social changes that we want in our societies or the social justice we want without these real relationships. Facebook can be one thing. It connects, with the people all over the world. But mind you, for the regime in Egypt, in Cairo, to fall, it is because, what cell phones were used, but people were able to congregate at the place of liberty, Tahrir Square, in the same thing in Tunisia and everywhere. Today, there is a mass movement of workers, faculty members at Temple University that are unionizing, that are organizing, and all of those things are actually the result of this kind of relationship that are being built. And I think that is key, and I wanted to stress on that. I love the way, Dr. Steve, you brought that out.
And I'll add just another brief comment. I think that self-sufficiency and individualism have such a huge cost. And there's such a huge trade-off for that. And I think so many of the challenges that we're all working to better are a symptom of those things. And so I think bringing students into spaces, or not even students, humans, people, into spaces where they can learn through a sense of belonging and connection, as opposed to the opposite, which is transactional, which is othering. It makes us all, it's harder because we bump up against our own discomfort and our limited understandings. We become mirrors for each other, and we learn from each other in ways that can be very uncomfortable. We also are so much stronger in that way. So it kind of sounds cliche and like stating the obvious, but I think the ailments of especially in our country, are the problems that we see all around us are so much symptoms of the lack of valuing community, relationships, belonging, togetherness, that it's time for a different approach to learning and working together.
Thank you. Yeah, Haji, I think some might say that self-sufficiency is even a myth. I might be one of those people. So yeah. So and I think to what I was hearing is right, like we can't know on our own. We can't move on our own. We can't make change on our own. And relationships as a unit of social change, I'm sure did not come from me. And I will need to, like anything else, I'm sure it came from voices that probably should be here more than me. But I think, yeah, definitely please, if someone looks that up, please let me know where that originally came from, because now I'm blanking on the original source. But yeah, thank you for uplifting those things. I think so the last question I have, and then I want to offer it out to our audience to ask some questions of our panel, or our panelists to ask each other questions, if so compelled, is what do you, in your experience or in your maybe more recent work, I think sometimes we think of these things more recently in our current efforts, what's something that you see as the greatest challenge to this work? Maybe one of the things that makes it more difficult or makes it more time intensive even, and what's something that's a cause for celebration in community engagement?
Well, in social movements, victories are to be celebrated all the time. I just gave the example of I will call it the hybrid movement that we started. the fact that, we were able to bring this movement, these women out of their comfort zone. At the hearing, there were about 80 of them that showed up. In all of the gap, the African, reality and everything in there. But for them to come in there in support of those who accepted to speak was already a victory. It a trail, it blazed a trail that, we are still marching on. And sometimes there are also some very small successes, right? We are dealing with human beings in here. We are dealing with connections. Imagine, again, with this very complex population in the city of Philadelphia, where, 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 10, if my statistics, were correct in here, a resident is, claims to be, 1 out of 10, claims to be an African immigrant. A city where we talked about the increase in the population as a result of the last census being credited to immigrant population. It means that they're in there. You go to the schools, the school, districts, population filled with children of immigrant families. When you look at all these ecosystem in there, and then you are able to prevent one single person or one family from the hassle of homelessness, that's the victory that we celebrate when at the end of the year. So sometimes the Dr. Steve is right. It's not just about the numbers, but it's about, what the quality of life that, what we help improve, even if it is on a very temporary, very short period of time. That's one thing that, what we celebrate a lot in the work that we do. However, the challenges, I'm going to pinpoint to 2 of them. One of them is the political climate that, what we are living in today. It does pose a huge problem because of this level of, I would say, quote unquote, manipulations. That will take me back to what happened the first month or first 2 months when President Trump, assumed, power at the White House, and the comment that he made, about African countries and Haiti, for instance. And you can remember the kind of reaction that, it sparked, all over the country, especially in Philadelphia, where we are. And then when you take that one also with some sort of increase in hate crime for immigrant population, that also prompted some people. The question is, where do all of those things, will come from? For me, it got to go down again to the political climate that, we live in, that is a supercharged, because let us not forget the United States, at the end of the day, became the #1 destination of world immigration by the 2000s. So you can imagine the kind of bullets that is being shot at this country with its exceptionalism. But at the end of the day, there are also so many difficulties that are inherent to the immigration system itself, to, again, the political climate that, again, reverberates into how people relate to one another, the kind of fear that, what communities have. And that's the reason why what the Knight Foundation did a few years ago with their event that they sponsored. They called the Breaking Bread, Breaking Barriers, using foods as a rallying point for communities to come together was a critical thing. And I believe that, the city of Philadelphia or whoever, now that we're going to have a new mayor or whatever it is, needed to invest money in that, in bridging, cultural gaps in communities at the grassroots level. And that will be my contribution to this important question.
Yeah, this sounds very interesting. Probably I'll add or build upon what Dr. Eddie just said, and seeing the struggle of the woman that you described as one of the challenges that we also face in community learning classes. I'm not sure, Dr. Eddie, you will correct me. I think the issue for the women is that they have indigenous knowledge that they have to actually, they have, but they still need to go to cosmology school and get a certificate and say that this is the knowledge we have. And this is part of the problem of knowledge production and sharing that Steve mentioned. Those women have knowledge and they have expertise, which sometimes is goes beyond what they can learn in a school or anywhere else, but they still have to prove that they have a knowledge that is sufficient to be able to do this work. And it is sometimes difficult given the institutional guidance says that exists, and also what is traditional academia to really take advantage of the evolving world that community engagement scholarship offers. But still, I believe there is a lot to do, but I think we are trying in the sense.
You are actually correct on how you describe the issue with the hybridization. I'm sorry, Teresa.
No, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Yes, Dr. Eric, I wanted to tell you that we participated in a Breaking Bread, Breaking Barriers in our neighborhood. And so it was success. And what these moments of success feel like, they feel wonderful. There's music, there's food, there's community feeling. It was a challenge getting a turnout. It's always, I think it takes a long time to, as you've all been mentioning, to build the trust and to get the turnout. For us, that's one of our challenges that we face daily. But when the good moments happen, they're really fantastic. Thank you.
I'll jump in very briefly. I think to go back to something that Haji just really put her finger on, I think the biggest challenge in promoting community engaged work, not just in higher education, but in the community itself, is individualism. I think we can have a kind of tunnel vision in our lives. Sometimes it's just simply to keep ourselves safe. So that's not a judgment, it's just a factor of the culture that we live in, that really engenders a kind of tunnel vision and individualism in folks. And it can be a real challenge to even ourselves break out of that, and to open our hearts to other people, which is like such a crazy thing to say. Like, but I experience it myself a lot. That's a big challenge in this work, is to open partnerships up through like a relationship framework, when so much of the resourcing for this kind of work is built around outcomes and not around relationships. In terms of celebration, I will take this opportunity to plug the 50th anniversary of Norris Square Neighborhood Project. This is an organization that has been serving the West Kensington neighborhood for 50 years. It started as a very small grassroots effort. And if folks are looking for hope and inspiration, I really encourage you to dancing and music and language. An organization that really embodies what it means to be committed to place, what it means to be feminist, woman-centered, culturally forward organization. I really encourage folks to Google My Neighborhood Project and look at the work of Norris Square Neighborhood Project and be inspired. And yeah, I'm grateful to be connected, and I thank you, Teresa, for being here today.
Thank you very much, Steve, for the plug.
It's interesting to see that Steve has this ads about NPS, but it's good. I was shy to be self-celebratory. I would like to say that, I mean, despite the challenges that we described, that we a bit lucky at Drexel to have a number of opportunities, especially through the Learning Center, and the vision of the leadership itself that understand that community engagement is something important, and to allow us to continue in this sense. It's not an area that is easy because it's not well leveled at the moment, and there is a lot to be done, and therefore it, you know, I was trying to bring that up, but until Steve talked about Norris Square, I wouldn't say anything about that.
So I'm going to piggyback on Steve's challenge of it, well, you piggyback on mine, I'm piggybacking on yours now, the individualism. So I'm going to say, along with that, just burnout, from distractions, from compassion fatigue, people feeling overwhelmed by so many problems and so many challenges, and then resulting in feeling disempowered and, unable to affect change. I have seen that with my nonprofit work in Haiti personally, and, among the community, that at the macro level, the things that are happening are so disturbing and so discouraging, because progress is made, and yet at a macro level, there's things that are happening that seem to be undermining progress to a certain extent. And so I'm speaking very personally now that the challenge of keeping eyes on the immediate impact, the immediate next steps forward, and not being kind of disillusioned or distracted too much by the overarching, sometimes what seems insurmountable challenges that might be present. And celebrating the tiniest of victories, the smallest, the ones that may even go unnoticed, the smallest ones, because at the end, that's often what, like, at least for me, really feeds my spirit to not be discouraged, and amplifying those victories for everyone to hear and for everyone to celebrate. As opposed to downplaying or dismissing the value of micro steps forward, micro impacts that may be taking 5 steps back and you took a half a step forward, and let's celebrate that. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, I think I was thinking a lot about the kind of currency of individualized notoriety. That's often like a reality. Trying to think about, how do we put our name on something? How do we make sure? And sometimes that's like a survival tactic, right? Like trying to make sure we have the resources we need, or but that kind of that desire or even need to have gains and have impact and show that kind of constant moving forward can sometimes make it more challenging to celebrate those small gains. And sometimes those small gains are all we have. And sometimes we're only guaranteed to like gain each other in the process. If, in within the context that you all described. So thank you, everybody. And so I wanted to open it up for questions, either from our attendees or questions from our panelists to other panelists. If you had things you wanted to ask.
If I can maybe jump in, this has been great for me, because I've been all over the United States because my father was also in the military. But I grew up in northern Michigan, very small community, very homogeneous community as well. And I guess when I initially, like growing up, when I thought of community engagement, I honestly wasn't really sure what it meant. I think a lot of people sometimes wonder what that means. And I guess going into this question, I was in the panel today, and we had a high school teacher who was designing a capstone for his students, getting involved in their communities. And his initial semester, he said it was an absolute failure. And he kind of looked into why it was. And all of his students had initially put down, like, how would you be involved in the community, or a similar question. And everyone said the same thing. Oh, we'll fundraise, we'll have money. And I think a lot of people tend to think of community engagement, they almost kind of like take the face away from it. And it's more so in the sense of, okay, well, here's money, we'll send it somewhere. It doesn't really matter what it was or how we interact with the community. I think obviously adding a face to the community is vital. And so he actually changed up his methodology a little bit. And I forgot exactly what he said, but he said by the end of the second year, he said some of the things that his students were actually doing were like very impressive. Going out in the community, even doing things like helping to plant plants, trees, that type of thing. So I guess my question is how do you think it's not just for students, but for people in general who kind of don't really know exactly what community engagement means? How do you inspire people to get involved in a manner that other than, you know, maybe that linear sense of we'll just donate money to this cause, we'll call it good?
I can jump in. A running joke that we have, to go back to Teresa's earlier running joke that they had about the things people say is like, is it safe in in this community to bring students there? Students aren't safe like in their normal life. Like we can't just assume that going out into the community is like a dangerous place. There are kids living there, you know? Like, is the community safe from those students? That's a question that like we tend to laugh about sometimes in like kind of a dark humor way, right? Like, how do we make the community exchange a process that's safe for everyone is a question that like we have to ask. And for me, that starts with vulnerability from me, like inspiring people to do this work is showing them that you will have to be vulnerable and that I can do that myself as a person who has a lot of security in their life and can extend myself through emotional vulnerability, sharing things that make me afraid, that I'm not certain about, showing the mistakes and talking a lot about the mistakes that I make. Not just in community work, but in like lots of different parts of my life and work. I think leading with vulnerability as opposed to leading with expertise, which is what academics tend to do as a reflex, is critical if you really want to open yourself to community engaged work that's relationship driven.
I will share this that first of all, for somebody like me who has known the Coalition of African Communities, we're in and out until we're leading it now. Those who are ready to give money, that's great. We need money. We need money for logistics. We need money for staff. We need money for this. That is great. So we're not going to shy away from that one as well. We also need the people. It can be student volunteers. It can be, workers, accomplished professionals who are, and even retired people who are looking for ways to improve relations in the communities. I mean, small nonprofit organizations need all of those assets in there. However, it comes down to trust. Even ourselves, to have these deep connections with the communities, and the example that I gave again, Weaver, the hair braiders, and then we have many others, we got to cultivate this relationship. Why? Because again, people are facing so many issues, but people also do have their victories that sometimes they can be very selfish, what to keep, because this is their history, this is their stories, this is something that makes them who they are, and sometimes they don't want to have that, being stolen away, taken advantage of by either other communities or other organizations. I give you an example. African, for instance, has had a long relationship with Drexel, with the University of Pennsylvania, and other institutions of higher education, whereby you have researchers who come in there to work on that research. At the end of the day, the question is who owns that research, and to what extent that research or the findings, will allow the organization itself to grow and build the capacity, for instance. More and more, we see that, what funders and partners have understood that and are ready to actually contribute to building the capacity of those partner organizations that help them connect with the community where they want to establish themselves. So trust is a key thing. And then it comes out of what? Long-term relationship, as Professor said. It comes out of prioritizing, should I say what, the centeredness of the community that you want to serve. It comes with not entering those communities that we are preconceived ideas or notion of that's the way things are, but rather opening yourself to, hey, listen, it may be this way, because it's a two-way learning, process. And finally, an example I want to give is Africa has worked with high schools around. A charter high school around in the Frankfurt area. Amazingly, all of the students that they sent us were children of African immigrants. The connections was already right there. They did not know a lot because many of them were born in here, but because they live in houses with their parents who are themselves African immigrants, it made it easier for them to relate with me, for instance, and to understand how these African men can also be crazy. I have one who is now a nursing student, and I'm not going to name her here, but she was interning, and then she would just look at me when I entered the office and say, "It's right here. You are looking for your keys." And I turned around and I said, "Oh," she said, "Yeah, because you act exactly like my father," right? But this kind of thing of relationship, kind of allowed to build in that as well. So I believe all of those elements are key and are very important. We have had also students, or interns from other communities. Another one who's maybe graduated now, should be a medical doctor now. That was a long time ago. White student who came, interned with us, but really, I don't know how the parents raised him, but he was open to all kinds of things to learn. And when we have this kind of individuals, believe me, the connection can be quick and the trust can be built very easily and faster to reinforce this community engagement. But if you know people who want to donate money, don't hesitate to connect them.
I just want to go back to Ryan's questions about how you motivate people to get engaged in community work, especially students. You mentioned that those students, after going to the community a couple of times, were able to get engaged and even plant trees and things like that. I think a key to community learning or community engagement is usually what you care about. If people care about something, I think it'll be interesting or possible for them to be willing to learn more about that. I remember in my class, so a student who likes music, for instance, would be willing to learn more about the instrument that they don't know exists, music instrument that they do not know exist. And with that, speak to people who know about it and learn more. They were able to learn about the history of things like pop music, or even music that have history into African a musical instrument or rhythm and things like that, and that helps a lot. So I think that is a big window for people who want to learn something. You want a cause, something they care about.
If I might interject too, he said something also that was very, at least to me, it stuck, was he said after the first semester, he said that failed, he went and he talked to each of the students and he gleaned the information that every single one of them said that I was influenced on my decision-making process when writing the papers and so forth by others around me, predominantly the teacher. And he said that really stuck with him. And so he went the next semester, he kind of changed up how he worded things. And he really encouraged them to think about community engagement by themselves, as opposed to what others around them were saying. And he said that honestly, something as small as that made that huge difference in how they approached what their vision for community engagement was. And that helped them kind of plan out how they want to interact with the community and actually gave it a face, I would say, as opposed to simply, I mean, again, I agree with Dr. Eddie, giving money is great, but getting involved. And that was, he said that's what he wanted them to take away from it, was how do you get involved in other ways and not be influenced by, other people around you as much. Obviously, community is important too, but thinking for yourself is what played the difference, according to him, at least.
I think one thing I would actually add is like working with students and thinking about engagement and thinking about the connection between engagement and change is for me, it's, I think to again, to Dr. D's point, like I think funding and resources is incredibly important. Lots of things are really important. Relationship building, trust building is really important. To me, it's less of a question of whether a student is deciding to do this fundraising, whether they're deciding to do direct service, whether they're deciding to do organizing. It's more of a question of how do we help them engage and not go home and not leave at the end of the engagement and not give up, like we're good at the end of the engagement and I'm going to move on. It's how do we help them engage and stay engaged and stay involved and stay committed and stay in relationship and stay in community, because like everyone mentioned, these issues are not going to be solved by one action. Communities are not going to be strengthened by one action or one thing, and we can celebrate those things, but it's how do we encourage and help students and help people think about how do we become a part of something for the long term, and take kind of small, take small actions over time.
Eric, I have a different way of looking at that, though I completely agree with you. From a and Teresa will understand, from a nonprofits, you want people who are engaged in the long term, because sometimes that's true. Let's take students. We are talking to today. They are in there, on a semester basis, right? Sometimes they do have a project that leads them to engage, or maybe they want themselves to do something, but there may be students, who are coming to Drexel, in this case, but from out of town. When the semester is over, they got to go back to their families. They have to go back here to work. So it always creates some sort of a shortage of volunteers. However, when you look at it from a two-way perspective, which means, what is this when students come to me? Lately, we have worked a lot with not Drexel, with Westchester University, bringing us, some interns. And the question I always ask the student is, what is this that you want AFRICOM to remember you of or for at the end of your either 4 months or 1 year with us? Which means that, you have to create something, right? And this thing that you create will definitely take you wherever you are going, even if your connection with AFRICOM is severed or comes to an end. What is it that what you gain from this community engagement that will inform the life that you do? And that's the way I believe I put a lot more of a work, because certainly of my other perspective as a faculty, as a teacher, we are there to impart knowledge that students can take to resolve problems in the world. So if we look at it from that perspective, I believe that it will be a two-way or a binary, a win-win situation, right? Whether you do 1 month with us, but when you leave, what is it that what you gain as perspective that will allow you to look at maybe immigrant communities or other people, low-income families, from a perspective that is completely different. And even when you leave the United States, to land somewhere for, let's say, international studies, maybe in another country, or you go to another country to visit as a tourist, or even to work, what is this that, by connecting with immigrant communities here will help you, for instance, resolve or understand better when you get to where you are going. So that's my way of resolving that conflict that, where you are putting, which is real.
Yeah, I think that's really great, great point about thinking like the long term with student impact as well. It's like you don't know, you can't predict what the impact that these experiences will have on students. Maybe a student will take one of our courses and then they won't ever work in food security or housing security again, but maybe they'll be inspired by the relationships that they built, and then they'll touch some other space or some other person, even if this particular issue or this particular community doesn't end up having, there's like so many connections that we have made with students, and they're somewhere else now, and I can see them on social media. They are taking that work into some other context, and I know because they tell me that like it was through these experiences that I found myself like a connection to this other thing. I think, yeah, those effects just spiral out, and it's really sometimes amazing to see.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think something I'm left with is that, you know, that the goal is for all of us to be changed by this work, you know, that yeah, that it's not about making change somewhere else, but kind of transformation personally, systemically, locally, globally, right, on all of the levels. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we have about 3 minutes left. I also wanted to, I know we did some shameless plugs earlier, but I wanted to also offer space for any of our panelists to offer some shameless plugs to either classes that they're teaching, projects they're working on, or events that they're hosting, organizations, things that they would suggest to those that are here or listening, and ways to get involved, or ways to come celebrate, or ways to get connected to some of this work.
I would be more interested in learning more, Ahaji, about your program in Haiti.
Well, wonderful. And actually maybe putting the link in the chat is a good idea. So my nonprofit is called We the Village, and we support children, orphan children in Haiti through education and food security and a bunch of other things. And we have a pretty strong community here in the Jersey, Philadelphia area as well. And so I can link that in the chat. We haven't been able to travel to Haiti, unfortunately, because of the situation there, but we still have a really active community and are doing things from afar. So yeah, thanks for asking.
For those who are going to be in the Philadelphia area this summer with COVID restriction, being more and more lifted, even though the pandemic is still around, there's a bunch of community events that expose students and people, of course, what to other cultures at either Penn's Landing. I heard that, what the Jazz Festival is going to revamp. These are areas, unfortunately, with again, the crazy gun violence that is engulfing the city, that makes people worry to be out. But these are cultural events that are, all over the place. There's also quite a number of nonprofit organizations serving different communities, whether they're brown, Black, or immigrant communities that always need a hand to help in and there. It can be in the tech area, so the student can open themselves to that, learn more, and truly acquire the badges as global citizens, if I may say so. And I want to say thank you for having me here.
I will add that we are in the process of launching our second run for our food and land security course, in which we partner with 3 different community agriculture sites, Sankofa Community Farm at Bartram's Garden, Iglesias Gardens in North Philly, and of course, North Square Neighborhood Project in West Kensington. It's a week-long immersive course that's hosted by Drexel University, but that takes place primarily in the Philadelphia community. It's a side-by-side course that's open to anyone who can get there. Drexel, non-Drexel, I don't care. Let's go. It's going to be really fun. The experience we had last year was really profound for some folks, reconnecting with their roots in agriculture and food. We also look at the effects of gentrification on communities. And we focus a lot on ancestral knowledge and how that's passed on through community agriculture work. I will post the link to the course here. Thank you. It's great to be here. It's great to hear everyone's thoughts on this. It's been such a pleasure.
What's the date again, Steve?
The course is listed for summer term, Drexel summer term, but the meeting days do not take place until the end of summer term. The on-site meetings, September 18th to 22nd. You're welcome to join us, Parfait. Come on.
Sure, sure. I wanted to say thank you for having me and to be able to participate into this conversation. It was really great conversation where I learned a lot. And here, yes, I work with Dr. Adi on the West African community. I would say the African community in general, but you know, this course is specific designed for West African community, and it's been a great ride so far. And I think, you know, I'm grateful for this partnership. And yeah, it's a Dr. Adi likes the word win-win, which is the way community partnerships should be.
I also want to thank you all very much. Et les messieurs, nous vous attendons dans les jardins cet été. Please come
Nous
to
nous
our
ferons le
gardens.
plaisir d'être là-bas.
Oui,
Nous nous
le
ferons
20
le plaisir d'être là-bas.
Ouais, le 22 juillet, n'oubliez pas.
D'accord. Merci beaucoup.
I think you would all love to meet our garden founders. One of our founders, Iris Brown. First of all, her dream is to go to West Africa. We're going to try and make it happen in 2024, but that's a secret. But she would love to meet you.
I hope she's not on that call or on this webinar to hear that, because it's a secret, right?
She doesn't do the internet.
No internet for her. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you again, Steve, Carrie, and everyone else. It's been wonderful to see you, meet you.
Good
Thank
to
you.
see you. Yeah, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to work with a lot of you and grateful just to share space with all of you today.
This has
Thank
been wonderful. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, I
Bye-bye.
just really want to thank you all very, very much. Again, when I moved to Philadelphia, I didn't really realize how powerful community engagement is in the city. Well, obviously my mindset has been changed for the better in that case. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And I look forward to, I know I work with a number of you to some capacity, but hopefully I can work with you, you know, those who I haven't worked with as much, more so in the future. So thanks.
Thank you.
Looking forward as well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.